Well, it looks like we've got it now. And you can see that I've gone a little bit past the damaged area here.
Hey, why is that, Randy?
I want to remove all the paint so that the primers and the fillers that we use are not going to be over the top of the paint. They don't adhere very well to the old paint.
Okay. Why don't we clean this up a little bit?
I'm going to take an air blower here and blow some of the dust away.
Now, if you're at home and you don't have an air compressor and an air blower like what we used here, you can use an old vacuum cleaner or a shop vac to kind of clean your area off.
Well, now we're ready to rough this dent out. And there's a couple ways that we could do this.
Okay.
One way is to spend some time to remove this inner door panel and see if we can have access to it from the back side, taking a hammer and actually working this metal flat from the back side.
Now, you mentioned that there's a safety brace or something built in this door, so you already know that we can't get at this dent from the back side. How are we going to approach it then?
Well, we're going to use a different method here because of its nature as a blind dent, and we're going to use a dent puller on this.
Okay, I happen to have one down here. It's a consumer model that you can buy in the stores to use. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how this works?
Well, this dent puller utilizes a sheet metal screw, which has to have a hole drilled into the panel, and insert the sheet metal screw into the hole, and then using the hammer part of the dent puller to work the dent out.
Okay, so I turned into the hole, and then slide the hammer like this to start pulling the metal back out.
Correct, and as you're doing that, you would like to use what I would call a body hammer here to hammer on that metal around to work it flat.
Okay. Now, drilling a hole in the metal, does that affect our repair?
I personally don't like to drill holes in the metal if I don't have to. If you have to drill a hole, I recommend that you weld it shut again.
Okay. Or use maybe a fiberglass filler?
Correct, because the reason is when you put your primers and fillers over an open hole like that, it has an opportunity for moisture to come in through the inside of that hole and possibly leave an impression in your final paint later on.
Okay. Now, you've got a method that's normally used by professionals. Why don't you tell us about that?
What we're going to use today is what I call a stud gun, and we're actually going to weld a small stud to this panel and then utilize a dent puller very similar to the one that you just had here and pull on that stud, consequently not having to drill a hole into the panel.
Okay, why don't we put them in here?
And I'm going to add a stud right down here in this body line, right at the crease in the body line, to see if we can't restore that body line.
Okay, so you've got the studs welded on here, Randy. Now what do we do?
Now we're ready to take our dent puller and grab onto those studs and pull them out.
Okay. See, that one looks pretty much similar to the one that I have right here.
Very much so. The only difference is just the end is adapted to pull on the studs rather than have the sheet metal screw for the holes.
Okay.
As I'm pulling this out, I'm going to take the body hammer and kind of work this metal around the outside.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're pulling that dent out already.
Well, it looks like this is coming out pretty good. It's pretty flat now.
Yeah, there's barely any dent left up here at all.
Let's move down to this one right in the body line here and see if we can't work that out a little bit.
I notice you don't even have to slam it very hard, really.
No, it doesn't take very much at all, and you want to be careful so you don't go too far.
Sure. Oh, you're just hammering some of the excess back in a little bit then?
Correct. You remember when we started, we were out actually a little bit down in the bottom here. And now that we're pulling this body line back into place, we can hammer this excess metal back down again. And it actually, right now, it feels pretty good. I think we're ready for some filler.
Okay. How do we remove these here?
I'm just going to take a side cutters and cut these studs off. Then I'm going to take our grinder again with our 24 grit disc and just grind the end of the stud off.
Okay.
Again, I want to be careful so I don't get the panel too hot to distort it.
Okay, Randy, I've got the body filler here, and I've mixed it up pretty good.
In the body shop, I have a plastic piece here that we use for mixing our plastic filler on.
Okay. If I didn't have a piece of plastic like you got there for mixing it, I could just use a piece of cardboard or something like that, couldn't I?
Correct.
Okay.
I've got the hardener here, and I'm going to knead this tube a little bit to mix it up. And I want to spread out about a 1-inch ribbon, about a golf ball size of filler. I'm going to take my spreader and knead this together until I get a uniform color. And now we're ready to apply this to the panel.
I notice you're spreading that on fairly thin, too. Is there any specific thickness that we're not supposed to exceed, or?
Well, you should try to rough your metal out so that you don't have to apply more than about a 1/16 of an inch of filler.
Okay.
I'm going to use a couple of different strokes here to work this body line back in so that we can get a nice sharp edge here.
Of course, notice Randy's using some wide strokes here, because the smoother that you put the filler on, the less work that you're going to have to do with the sandpaper to get it to your final finish.
In about 10 minutes, we should be able to come back and sand this down.
Okay.
Well, I think we're about ready to sand now, but just to make sure that we are, I'm going to take and scratch this a little bit with the sandpaper. If we can see white underneath there, then our plastic filler is cured enough to start.
Okay. Now remember, whenever sanding, make sure you wear your protective dust mask. Is there any particular direction that we want to sand, Randy?
Yes, we want to be in a back and forth straight line motion.
Okay.
Well, it's starting to look pretty good now.
Okay, what grit of sandpaper did you use for that first sanding bit?
Right now we're using 40 grit sandpaper.
Okay.
Now we have this sanded out. I'm just going to clean it off with the blower a little bit here.